Project Colossus, deemed irrelevant. My identity, deemed irrelevant. This body is inadequate. No matter how much I modify it, no matter how much of my old self I try to discard, I remember. I still feel the phantom limbs of the aggregate being I had become. They leave me to toil away on their war effort. A mad scientist kept under lock and key. I have nothing left to explore. My final mark on this cosmos will be to let it burn. I am patient 10474881. Designated identity, Flameblast.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Internet Personality Vangelus here with a look at the second paragraph of the first chapter of Fansproject's Crossfire Causality line. This is Flameblast, the rebodied explorer, according to his bio card anyway. Much like Warcry, this guy is Explorer with a new head and a couple new bits and bobs. This is still my favorite of the two Crossfire scout-sized dudes. Something about the body aesthetics and all the sharp pointy bits really just do it for me. And on Flameblast, it's all kind of accentuated with his white and black color scheme. Pieces contrast against each other hardcore, and not in a bad way. His new head still has that same pair of scowling eyes, but everything's been rounded off and he's got a fin on top, in homage to an old-timey Micromaster called Fireshot. While I do like this head sculpt, I think it does lose some of the effective angular anger that boiled out of the Explorer. I feel like his madness and rage are not quite as represented here. It's like it's all been softened a little bit. But he does have a mighty Don Figueroa-style chin piece, which rather sadly has already scratched his paint off. Be careful when you're transforming this guy. As he shares Explorer's body, he also shares Explorer's articulation. It's all the same jointage, some pretty good cuts and ball joints, a really nice clicky waist, and some perhaps overly chunky shins. It's all pretty well done, though. The joints actually feel a little bit tighter on this guy, though that may be because my Explorer has been connected to the Colossus for so long. But I was quickly reminded how much I love the free-range ball-jointed ankles on this figure. And his expressive little ball-jointed head. Much like Explorer, he also has a machete, although his does not fold in any way. It's just kind of a big chopping knife. The new pieces on him, though, are these white booster bits, which can freely swivel, which is okay, but I kind of wish they had a click-in spot as well to kind of stay stable. It's cool, though, how you can point them around to make it look like he's using them to fly. Their gimmick is you can flip them open, and each one of them does this. There's a pistol inside both of these boosters, and the it's pretty small, fits in tightly in his hand, and it looks great. So he can wave a sword around with a gun, or you can just have him dual-wield his pistols akimbo style. And these little guns are really well done. They're subtle, they store away, and they really enhance the play value of the figure. Sadly, he can't reach down to pull them out of the holsters themselves, or at least I haven't been able to get him to do so. But this goes a long way in making this dude recommendable even if you already have Explorer. But sadly, despite all the cool new weaponry and new components, I still can't find anywhere to actually store this solidly on his body when he's not using it. The one major disappointment about these booster blocks is actually how they transform. In order to get to vehicle mode, they are supposed to basically go from being on this side of the wing to being on this side of the wing. And even though they're on an articulate piece, you do have to literally pull them off and then rotate the black bit and slot them back in on the other side. So I kind of wish there'd been a hinge here, but at the same time, given the way that they attach to the wing through this somewhat small little slit, I can see how this might be a little bit safer and less prone to breakage. So it's a bit of a shame, but I can see where it's coming from. It is a bit of parts forming, though, as well, so be prepared for that. When compared to his previous Explorer-class chassis, Flameblast is clearly a lot more heavily armored, granted entirely due to 2 blocks on his legs. But somehow the combination of his color scheme with those white blocks makes him look a lot thicker, though he does lose a lot of the sinister nature of Explorer. Explorer had a piercing expression, a muted color scheme, and the feeling of a cold, ruthless intelligence. while Flameblast looks a lot more vibrant and contrasting. I think they're both great effects, but they are also definitely a factor that will come into play if you're trying to choose one over the other. Flameblast's vibrancy does make him a little bit stronger as a standalone figure, though. But what about their vehicle modes?
Your resistance serves no purpose. We will all unite as ashes in the end. Transform! Allow me to expedite your extermination!
This is a very shuttle-like shuttle mode. The monochrome color scheme in predominant white is about as space shuttle as you can get. However, much like Warcry, a lot of the patterns are alike. The big differences are that due to Flameblast's sword, you get a different kind of tail fin, and there are windows in the front, so everyone who was flipping out about the unmanned shuttle thing from before, you're all set. He has a faux two-dimensional Tampodon cockpit. The white boosters also help give it a slightly different shape compared to Explorer. The sheer delicious whiteness of the plastic is definitely working in this thing's favor. And even though I wasn't raging about the unmanned drone thing, I do kind of find this mode slightly more effective than the previous iteration. So as you can see, despite Flameblast not having that many different paint apps, I think he's a little bit more successful than Warcry. They both have very distinct robot modes, but it's Flameblast who also pulls that off to some degree in his vehicle mode. Once again, we revisit that question of whether or not the Causality guys can combine like the Crossfire-02 guys. Now, of course, Flameblast can assume this arm position easily because he's got all the same parts as Explorer. He's even got the wrist peg. And this is the shoulder connection block that uses those internal chest clips. The far more interesting question, though, is can this arm use this connector point, that being the one usually used for the helicopter? Because if it can, that means that you can do all of this stuff with just one Crossfire 2 set, and you won't have to buy any kind of doubles of this guy to get another internal chest-based plug. So let's give this a shot and see what happens. I believe this is the correct orientation up here. And I think that using the white slits that these things plug into and a little bit of creativity here, you can actually get a decent approximation of the arm. It's a little bit loose. It's held together more or less entirely by the strength of the joints on here. They're just kind of gripping it. And I think that for display, this could work. Certainly it's not as solid as the other connection here, and it would not probably stand up that well to being posed roughly. But if you just want to have this arm stuck on there, I think this is doable. So, for those of you who do have Explorer and Munitioner, you don't have to necessarily buy doubles to get full combining use out of them. But if you want to use these guys at the same time, it could be a little bit finicky on this end. Since Explorer was my favorite part of Crossfire-02, I admit a bit of bias going into his retooled remake, but I just love the total package it brings to the table. A characterful robot mode, aesthetically aware posability and sculpting, an excellent space shuttle conversion, and a new accessory loadout that leaves him equipped for all kinds of display options. Like Warcry, Flameblast runs only $10 cheaper than his Colossus counterpart, which is a hard price to swallow up front for a standalone dude of his stature. However, I do not feel one would suffer any regrets over pulling the trigger and picking him up. He's got almost no draw other than what comes in his box, but that package's contents are tasty indeed. This has been Internet Personality Vangelus. That was the first chapter of Causality, and now we wait. We wait for ninjas.